Hello, my name is Allison Goodsby, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about fashion bloggers' Instagram aesthetic and how we can approach this conversation with a Christian worldview. So I just want to start by asking a simple question, and you can raise your hand to answer yes, but how many of you in this room actually have an active Instagram account that you use? Okay, so I'll say 97% because of our two professors. But quite a few of us, the majority of us in this room actually use the platform. So now to take it a step further, how many of you follow at least one fashion account? Okay, so again, even the men want to raise their hand, that's fine, I'm not judging. So this is a huge majority of the people who are on this platform in general, so this topic is incredibly relevant. So I just want to talk about how public relations professionals are super motivated to talk about this topic because it's so relevant in our field. My personal experience in social media management has been a key motivator in my interest in fashion bloggers and Instagram presentation of the self. So if you're not familiar with this term, it's basically just like it sounds. It's how someone presents themselves. So this could be when they get their picture taken, how they pose, or when they meet a new person, the information they offer up, or it can even be translated for social media platforms and how they present themselves on there. So my experience in social media and public relations as an industry was shifted to emphasize blogging when I became the social media team lead for a blog named Grace Bell in Orange County. So I got this job last year, and it's still currently my job right now, and I have been opened up through this position to the world of fashion blogging. Now, Grace Bell isn't a fashion blog in particular. We more focus on a broad lifestyle and community platform. However, we interact with fashion bloggers almost daily. And so I thought that it would be super relevant to bring this conversation in light of my experience. So through Grace Bell, we are centered around 4 personas, and that is the creative, the adventurer, the sweetheart, and the fashionista. Through these personas, we encourage young women to live life beautifully by expressing themselves. With this job, I have gone from a mere spectator of my favorite blogs on Instagram to actually working out what it looks like to represent a blog on the platform of Instagram, as well as other social media platforms. Additionally, I've also had experience in writing blog posts and that center around the fashionista persona because this is the one that I most identify with. So for example, I recently wrote a blog post all about the top 5 spring fashion trends for 2017. So this unique experience has allowed me to understand where these fashion bloggers get their inspiration from because I myself have had to come up with relevant and interesting content in this industry. As you can see from these screenshots from accounts that I follow, these are fashion bloggers. There's a specific aesthetic that these bloggers have. These photos are bright, they're crisp, they're clear, they have lots of whites, lots of feminine girly touches with pinks and flowers, and a lot of neutral colors. These photos almost have an airy feel. So let's keep in mind that not every single fashion blogger has this exact aesthetic because they'll vary based on the style that they wish to represent. However, I do think that it's interesting that most fashion bloggers tend to stick within these parameters when they post on Instagram. If you are a fashion blogger on Instagram, this is your aesthetic. So let's define exactly what I mean when I say the buzzword of aesthetics for this presentation. If you want to look up to the slide, I have 2 definitions going for us. We have the Google definition, which is a set of principles underlying and guiding the work of a particular artist or artistic movement. So this is just basically for the word aesthetics in general. It's not pertaining to social media, but rather how the word has been used throughout time. And then Urban Dictionary defines it as a combination of things that are pleasing to look at. So this one is definitely more narrowly focused on aesthetics as it pertains to social media. So I thought that it was incredibly relevant to add the Urban Dictionary definition of aesthetics because, let's be honest, this word has almost become like a cliche in our generation. I can't even tell you how many conversations I've had where people say, leave comments on Instagram photos, or even just in person, they'll say like, that aesthetic though, or like, your aesthetic is goals. Like, I'm sure you guys have heard those conversations as well. And so it's super relevant and something that every Instagrammer, regardless of if you're a brand or not, talks about. So in essence, every online platform, not just Instagram or social media, has an aesthetic in general. For me, I wanted to carefully handcraft my e-portfolio as well as my Instagram account to reflect my personal brand. So across these platforms, you can see a thread of consistency in branding. I intentionally wanted to communicate to others who I am, and I couldn't do this if every single online platform that I was present on had a different aesthetic. In this way, aesthetics has a powerful ability to round out a brand. It is vital for public relations professionals to understand their brand's aesthetic because of its popularity with the general public, as I've said earlier. If a brand or a fashion blogger is not aware of their aesthetic, then how can they effectively represent their identity on Instagram? It becomes a slippery slope of brand unawareness, and ultimately, I believe it will make you far less competitive than those who are also in this industry. On a side note, I want to ask, I wonder how many of you have heard of what's called a Finstagram? It's a recent trend in which people create secondary Instagram accounts that will allow them to post whatever picture they want, regardless of its aesthetic. The word itself actually means fake Instagram. So the rise of these accounts led me to question the industry of social media as a whole and its ability to endorse authenticity. I recently conducted a study with fashion bloggers, and I just basically asked the question, okay, so you have this set aesthetic that you put forward on your Instagram, but let's say you take a photo and you love it and you want to post it, but it doesn't match this aesthetic. What do? I thought it was incredibly interesting that most of them replied that they simply post it to another social media platform, this being one that's less aesthetically appealing than Instagram. Or they also replied that they post it to their Instagram story so it does not interfere with their personal aesthetic. To me, that information is truly fascinating. It raised questions for me such as, who set these aesthetic norms? And how is it that an entire industry has been trained to view Instagram in this specific way? Unfortunately, my study was not conclusive enough to draw the answers to these particular questions, but in my opinion, that's a rich field of study that could be done in the future. Now, with all this information on aesthetics under our belts, let's shift our focus to fashion bloggers' aesthetics and us as Christian people. Can we do it all? Can we identify a trend and do it authentically, sticking to our personal convictions? Aesthetic trends, by the way, pertain to far more than just fashion bloggers. This just happens to be the niche market in which I'm personally passionate about. So professionals can identify by the way that Instagram works that this platform is incredibly rooted in a community center. This platform is community. Additionally, as we discussed earlier from the screenshots of the fashion bloggers, there is a specific trend in the industry in photo editing. That's just a fact. In addition, we also know that there are relationships that are rooted in authenticity. We know this from being PR professionals studying for 4 years at Biola about authentic relationships and how we can approach them. The real question comes when we combine these three components. Can we even do it? Is it possible in the public relations industry to have these three components? In order to understand the use of social media within a Christian worldview, I believe that we must look to Scripture. Specifically, 1 Peter 4, 9 through 10, which says, "Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gifts you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." This is key in my personal and professional view of social media platforms such as Instagram. If we are not offering others a place to display the gifts that they have received from the Lord, then why are we even a part of this online community? The purpose of social media is to connect with others. And I think that many scholars, Christian and secular, would agree on that statement. However, us as Christians, we have the unique ability to take it one step further and enter into the concept of soul hospitality. There has been a shift in the professional view of success on Instagram, and I think that this is really interesting. Professionals now not only gauge that the success of an Instagram account, professionals not only now gauge the success of Instagram account by the amount of followers or connections the brand has, but rather we now measure success by how often people are engaging with your platform in a meaningful way. Do people feel like they want to share a piece of who they are on your photo because you have extended them hospitality? I think that this verse is key to understanding how to approach a platform different than that of a non-believer. Another way we can approach this conversation through Scripture is through Philippians 2, 3 through 4, which states, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." So now that we know that our duty through social media is to bring people together in a hospitable way, how do we, in a hospitable way in which they can express their gifts, we must also keep this verse in mind when it comes to selfishness. This verse might be the most important thing when concerned to fashion bloggers' Instagram aesthetic. Fashion bloggers' Instagram are saturated with photos of themselves. In fact, their entire blog is based around their perception of what fashion is and what's trendy in their industry in their eyes. So, I don't believe that this automatically means that there's going to be selfish behavior. Of course not. But I do believe that this leaves room for the attention to be cast onto the blogger for the most of the time. So in this, I think that Christians need to be conscious of what it means to truly look out for the interest of others. This means authentically engaging with followers, replying to comments and direct messages, and being intentional about pursuing relationships. Obviously, there is no way to connect with every single person on Instagram because some fashion bloggers have thousands, if not millions, of followers, and that's just impossible. However, I do think that there is a call to those in these positions to make an extra effort to reach out and connect. It's one thing to comment on your photo or to reply to a comment on your photo or even to like one of your followers' photos, but it is a completely new thing to be inspired and driven by the passion of those who follow you instead of the other way around. In a Christian worldview, this is one way to take away the selfish ambition that could set in this industry. People are more important than the clothes will ever be, bottom line. Therefore, I believe that yes, it is possible to stick to trends of this industry while maintaining a Christian worldview. I can speak with experience that it takes work. I recently crafted my entire Instagram to match my aesthetic of my online portfolio, as I spoke about earlier, and let me tell you that that was not without difficulty. Choosing between aesthetics and personal preference can be a struggle at times, but ultimately it comes down to truly believing in yourself as a brand and wanting to put forth the best you possible on this platform. I wanted to create a conversation and connection through my aesthetic. And at the same time, I want to be inspired by those in my field who present themselves in their own aesthetic. Inspiration can spark creativity that would not be present had an aesthetic not caught my eye and made me click on their profile. By keeping hospitality and selflessness in mind, we can approach the conversation with people who are inspired by our content on Instagram and create connections in an authentic way. By mixing these three components of hospitality and selflessness, passion, which for me would be fashion, and social media trends, we can get what I coin as our personal aesthetic. This model can really be used for any business or brand if we are inspired by our passions, humble in our convictions, and up to date with social media trends. Our Instagram aesthetic will not only be impressive on a professional scale, but lives can and will be affected. People matter, and Instagram aesthetics, even as lighthearted of a subject as we tend to make it at times, can have the ability to show this. Thank you so much for being a part of my conversation on Instagram aesthetic, and I would just like to open up the floor to any comments or questions that you might have.